And you were right about one thing, though, Dad. She is a hootie-tootie disco cutie. Hootie-tootie disco cutie! Hootie-tootie disco cutie! Hootie-tootie disco cutie! Hootie-tootie disco cutie!
Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 138 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. This week we're talking with Justin Folk, the director of the excellent new docudrama, No Safe Spaces. The war for free speech is underway, and this film may be the culture's best chance of preserving an essential all-American right. I'm not exaggerating. This week I wanted to start the show on an optimistic note. Lots of doom and gloom in the headlines. Let's say something a little bit more uplifting. This week I attended a stand-up comedian's performance / panel discussion. It was hosted by the great Lou Perez of We the Internet TV. He's a previous hit show guest and a wonderful comic. He's the kind of guy that tells jokes to the left, to the right, to the middle. Very funny stuff. Check out We the Internet TV on YouTube. End of plug. Now, his event was called The Funny Thing About Hate Speech, and it offers some really great insights into the First Amendment and a lot of discussions we're having right now about speech. Now, the ensuing Q&A didn't get contentious. People laughed. They asked some tough but interesting questions. Then the event wrapped and people had a beer or two. Together. Not so bad, right? Not so hard either. On another kumbaya-like note, I conducted a new critic versus critic piece at HollywoodInToto.com. It's all about the movie No Safe Spaces, which we'll be discussing more in a little while. Now, I read a few scathing reviews of the film from some obviously very left-of-center critics. I shook my head and I kind of dismissed them. I mean, I get where they're coming from. They're not really kind of ready to engage this material head-on, and they don't seem to mind that people right of center are being discriminated against, plain and simple. But I read one critic's review. His name is Mike McGranahan, and his take on No Safe Spaces kind of bugged me, I have to say. He wasn't a hack at all, but I think he really missed the point of the movie and the overall conversation we're having about free speech on college campuses and off. So rather than getting angry or sending a surly tweet or something like that, I reached out to him. I said, hey, do you want to do a critic versus critic for my site? And you can publish it on your site as well. We'll do it via email, go back and forth until we've kind of both had our say. Well, he agreed. We did just that. And now that particular story is on his site, ilc.com, and also at, of course, HollywoodInToto.com. Now, I think we both made some good points in the conversation, and we definitely didn't name-call each other or let the things get out of hand. You see? It is possible. It just happens to be getting more and more uncommon these days. It kind of reminded me a little bit of what happened on The View this week. Donald Trump Jr. visited the show, and all heck broke loose. Well, who saw that coming? Everyone. And some really funny things emerged, and I broke them down a little bit on my website as well. But I think one of the key lessons here is that, hey, kudos to Team View. They had Donald Trump Jr. on in the first place. They could have easily ignored him, pushed him aside, but they let him air his views and his arguments. Did he get the better of them, or did the host get the better of the son of Donald Trump? Well, you can decide that. But that's what I like. We need more outreach, not less. And even when it's as flawed as one of Joy Behar's completely unhinged arguments. You see? I didn't even call her a bad name. And now here's the hit tweet of the week. This week's winner is Rob Schneider. The SNL alum and star of Real Rob on Netflix weighed in on Election Day. And I suspect his thoughts will ring shockingly true to other people who happen to live in the Golden State. Here we go. Living in California is like being in an abusive relationship. You keep giving her money, but you don't know where it's going. If you get sick, you have to take care of yourself. And any day you could come home and your house is on fire or filled with homeless people. Is he right? Bingo.
Don't touch that dial. You're listening to my daddy's podcast.
This week's hit tip of the week is the 24-hour war. Podcaster Adam Carolla co-directed this fascinating look at the battle between Ford versus Ferrari in the 1960s. And if that name sounds a little familiar, well, there's a movie coming out November 15th, Ford versus Ferrari, starring a couple of people you may know, Christian Bale and Matt Damon. Now, Carolla's film is a documentary, not a narrative feature like that particular movie. And it's not going to be in the discussion of the Oscars, although I think the Bale performance here in this film is so good, it just might be, maybe even some more Oscar nominations too. But the Carolla documentary, The 24-Hour War, is more clinical, more revealing of the battle that was happening at the time. It was all over the bragging rights for Le Mans, France's signature road race. Now, I got to say, I am not a car guy at all. Adam Carolla is the ultimate car guy. I am the complete opposite. But the 24-Hour War really hooked me early on and never let me go. It's the attention to detail that matters in this film. They really dig up some great information, and it makes the human element of the story pop all the more in an impressive fashion. Now, I wish I could say that the 24-Hour War was streaming on Netflix or Amazon Prime. It isn't. It was for a while on Amazon. It's not available now. But if you want to see Ford versus Ferrari, if you want to just kind of curious about the real story without all the bells and whistles of a Hollywood drama, I really recommend you check it out any way you can. And in our streaming age, it's just available in a few clicks and maybe a couple of bucks out of your pocket.
Political Spirits, the weekly conservative podcast that says the left and right should have a few drinks and talk. The only podcast that intersperses commentary with the sound of pouring alcohol. Host Franklin Rye, an experienced governmental affairs professional, offers analysis, commentary, and conservative solutions mixed in with amusing anecdotes about the sausage-making process. Ever wonder how democracy is like a Chevy Suburban? Did the Beatles really write conservative songs? How a Democrat politician is like the Arquillians in Men in Black. Add to that occasional historical episodes with a patriotic bent, kept at 30 minutes or less, perfect for a commute, and you have a podcast recipe to serve conservatives, political news and opinion junkies, and those who just wonder how on earth we reached the point where so many in our country think patriotism is a dirty word. Please join us at Political Spirits. That's politicalspirits.libsyn.com or on Twitter at Franklin Rye.
There's a really good reason I've been covering no safe spaces a lot, both on this podcast and at HollywoodInToto.com. The movie matters. It's important. We should be talking about this. And so far, the box office receipts have been reflecting that. Doing very well in limited release, and each week it's opening up in more and more theaters. This weekend, you'll get to see it across the country in select locations. Next weekend, November 15th, it should be much, much wider. So you're going to get a chance to see it, and we definitely want to talk about it. And that's why I invited the film's director, Justin Folk, on the show. Now, Justin actually worked in the FX arena for a while before making his documentary debut with No Safe Spaces. And it's funny, you can tell that. This movie looks good. Now, I've seen a lot of right-of-center documentaries that are a little bit rough around the edges. You can tell the budget's very threadbare, and it shows. Well, not here. This one's really beautiful to look at, good production values, but that's not really the point. We're fighting for the soul of the First Amendment in America right now. It's not an exaggeration. And I don't know if we're going to be declaring victory anytime soon, if we will at all. It's a really tough fight, and this movie is working on the good side of the aisle. Trust me. Now, No Safe Spaces addresses all these issues, and it lets Adam Carolla and Dennis Prager guide us through the problems, kind of like a comedian and a podcaster and a radio show mainstay, kind of just making sure that we understand the nooks and crannies of the conversation. It's a very good documentary, and Justin really breaks it down in interesting ways in this conversation. Here's my chat with No Safe Spaces director, Justin Folk. Well, Justin, you've got some pretty serious credentials in the visual effects arena, and I want to obviously get to No Safe Spaces, but let's real quickly start there. I was kind of curious how you ended up in that part of show business, and then we can get to your transition to the new documentary.
Well, I graduated from film school, and after I went to school, I just started working in the film business, film industry, and I did a bunch of different jobs. I worked on set on a number of shows. Eventually, I just moved into post-production and visual effects, mostly because you're usually working in a air-conditioned environment, and it was just better hours. But now I worked in a number of films, and I worked for a visual effects company for a while that did some really high-end movies, and it was just a good experience. After a while, though, I really want to do my own content, and so I left that world and started my own production company.
Gotcha. Now, so you were kind of interested in directing all along, and then when No Safe Spaces happens, was that sort of a happy accident that you were able to kind of go in that direction?
Yeah, I've always loved directing my production company. We do a lot of commercial work, and so a lot of my experience has been telling 30-second stories instead of an hour and a half format. But I've done a lot of videos, a lot of commercials, and I think that's what sort of prepared me to do a full-length feature film. But it was a great opportunity. Really wanted to do something long form. Really wanted to do something of importance, something that would hopefully affect the culture. And No Safe Space is the product of all that work.
The movie looks good. And obviously we're not looking at a millions and millions of dollar budget. It's a smaller budget. Do you think that maybe your work in the past helped kind of prepare you to make a movie that looks sort of bigger and bolder than it actually is, at least from a financial point of view?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. Humbly, I would say yes. I would say we were able to do a lot with very little. The movie did not have a big budget. Thankfully, we crowdfunded this campaign, or crowdfunded the movie, and so by people giving us small donations, we were able to finance the film. But we still didn't have a lot to work with in comparison to what you would have on a bigger movie. And really, our goal was to make something that was very cinematic. Mm-hmm. People don't typically shell out $15-16 to go see documentaries at the theater when it's just a bunch of talking heads. So we knew we had to up the game up a little bit and really make something that was cinematic. And that's why we have the reenactments, we have the animation, we have different things in the film that really make it feel more like a cinematic experience. But we were able to do quite a lot with very little budget-wise. And part of that is my experience, but really a lot of that is my team. I just have a wonderful team that I work with, a lot of really great guys that I collaborate with. The cinematographers are great. Anton Sim, Brandon Lepard, and a couple of guys. A lot of guys that we worked with are just very talented guys that work in the industry, and we were just able to tap into their talent.
When you approach this particular film, I'm going to guess you are aware to a certain extent of what was happening on college campuses. Was it eye-opening once you kind of dug in deeper and met the students and did the research and said, oh my goodness, well, just describe that journey for you, or were you already on board and knew how bad it was?
Well, it's interesting when you're standing kind of afar, when you're outside of it, it all kind of sounds like a fairy tale, like a bad fairy tale. And when you actually go to these campuses and talk to these students, it all becomes a little bit more real and just kind of darker and more sad. Now, it was interesting, like talking to a lot of students, it did really give us some reason to hope, because we really met a lot of great students along the way that were pushing back against this crazy oppression of speech that's happening on campuses. And so that did give us some reason to hope. There's just some bright kids out there that are I guess call them the resistance, but they're bright, they're fighters. And I think in investigating this story, we were able to come away with, it wasn't a total nightmare. It wasn't just a horror story all the way through. There was some reason to hope.
I think when you look at what's captured in the film, you could point to this example or that example and say, oh my gosh, that really jumps out at me. But for you personally, is there something in the film, an example you can just briefly describe and say, that above all else shows you what the problem is?
Well, we have a sequence in our film that showcases or that shows what happened at Evergreen State College up in Olympia, Washington. And when we did our research on this, we really thought that this one example kind of was a good example of everything that's happening on all these other campuses. We interviewed a professor there by the name of Brett Weinstein, and he ran into trouble up there. There was a big protest, and he actually describes what happened to him as he's a biology professor. He actually describes it as a case specimen for what's going on at large around the country. So we really felt like the Evergreen story, if we told that well, it could sort of represent all these other stories, because there's no way that we could touch on every single story. This stuff is happening all over the place. And so we just felt like we really needed to focus in on a story like Evergreen to really show what's going on, a little bit about what's behind it, and really just how destructive it is.
Mm-hmm. We, there are fewer and fewer things in our culture where we can all unite. And I thought naively at first that this was an issue, free speech, free expression, where we can kind of have that unification. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. But your film does have Van Jones and Cornel West and Alan Dershowitz, people of the left who are very vocal. I thought Van Jones was maybe the most eloquent voice in the whole movie. Were there other people that you tried to kind of connect with for the movie that turned you down? Or I was kind of curious, from a behind-the-scenes perspective, were you unsuccessful reaching out to other people who are on the left as well?
Yes. The answer to that is yes. There was, in particular, the one interview that I really wanted, the person I really wanted to talk to was the president of Northwestern. It's a big, Big Ten school, and he had written an op-ed and has been very outspoken in defense of safe spaces. And I just thought that was interesting, with all this stuff going on. And he was very much a proponent of safe spaces and sort of that whole mentality. So we really wanted to get him in the film to provide a counter argument. It was very difficult finding counter arguments. It's funny, when you bring up when the topic is freedom of speech, people tend to just close their mouths. It's very odd and ironic. But the president of Northwestern is the guy we reached out to and really wanted to talk to him, and we didn't get anywhere with it. And we pursued several times to try to talk to him. He ultimately is in the film because he did talk to Katie Couric on her show, and so we just used a clip from that. But it would have been nice to have somebody actually, I guess, make the defense for safe spaces and sort of this mentality that you need to be protected from ideas on a campus. But ultimately, yeah, there was others as well that we tried to contact, people we wanted to talk to, but were turned down. But you're right, guys like Van Jones, I agree with you. I think he is one of the more eloquent voices in film. I think he actually makes the strongest argument against some of this stuff. So we were ultimately able to find some really good people to talk to. But like anything, when you're doing a documentary, when you're doing a film, and you're trying to find your story, you're out there trying to get interviews with people. Some work out, some don't, and it kind of steers you in a direction. And ultimately you uncover your story as you go along.
Yeah, you're working with Adam Carolla and Dennis Prager, two very different people, two very strong personalities. I think they each have their unique strengths. Can you maybe share an example of how one or both of them made the movie different, better, something that they brought to the project that maybe you didn't expect or didn't see on paper at first?
Yeah, they're a great 1-2 punch. And the amazing thing is, they have a really great friendship. These two guys, they really like each other. They make each other laugh. They're both excuse me, they're both super insightful. They just, they work well together and they play off each other. I guess I'll use an example that Adam Carolla likes to use. When he talks about their relationship, he basically describes it as, you need to deliver a message, but you have to get people sometimes to laugh beforehand. And he kind of compares it to when your dog is sick and you need to give your dog medicine. You can't just feed a dog, the pill. The dog won't eat the pill. You have to crush it up and you have to wrap it in hamburger meat. And the way he describes it is Dennis Prager is the pill and Adam Carolla is the hamburger meat. And so that's kind of a funny example of how these guys operate. Adam will make you laugh, and we find that when people laugh, they're just much more open to listening, much more open to hearing what you have to say, what ideas you're bringing forth, if you can just get them to laugh a little bit. So having humor in the film was important to us, obviously, with a guy like Carolla. The guy's just never not funny. And so that was a real asset to have sort of the comedy of Adam Carolla, but also just the sage wisdom of Dennis Prager.
Yeah. The movie is out in select theaters now. We'll share more about how it's expanding. But so far, either with film festivals or college screenings or even those initial screenings in Phoenix, any reactions that caught you by surprise? Or, I mean, you could expect people being angry, people being frustrated, people being glad this message is getting out there. But anything else that has sort of bubbled up so far that you maybe didn't see coming?
Yeah, there's one thing, and I'm actually proud of this. We've done a number of these promotional screenings showing the film to people, and I've gotten a very, very strong reaction from people that are self-described liberals. One woman in particular, she's a registered Democrat. She's a school teacher, and she was at one of our promotional screenings just recently. It was actually the one here in Denver, and she was just so excited about this movie. And it just struck me as like that, that we did our job. We really wanted to make a film that went outside the bubble. We just didn't want to do a film that only conservatives would like. We felt like this issue is so important, and we wanted to make sure that it got outside the bubble so that people, no matter what their political leanings are, that they hear our story, they see our story, and they understand these issues, because we feel like they're fundamental issues. They're not partisan issues. And so for me, the reaction from people that are self-described liberals that really, really enjoy our film, it's very much something I'm proud of. It's a reaction that we are shooting for, but we didn't know if we'd get there or not. And I'm very reassured that that it's happening, that we're getting that reaction.
This is sort of a maybe even an awkward question, but one of the things I've noticed, I've read a few reviews of the film, and some were positive, some were negative, but the negative ones intrigued me in that it wasn't them saying, I didn't like the pacing, I didn't like the cinematography. They really disagreed with the message of the film, and I think that they often blatantly ignored the facts that are lined up for the viewer. What's your take on that? I mean, I'm going to mention the AV Club. It's I guess part of the Onion media universe, and they're a very left of center site. But you would think that people being shouted down on a college campus would cut through any sort of tribalism, any sort of my side versus your side, but not really. As an artist, as someone who's worked in Hollywood, as someone who directed this movie, what's your take on that?
It's an interesting question. You never know what you're going to get with these critics. Obviously, not everybody is going to like your movie, and you never know where people are coming from when they're going in to do a review of your film, what kind of person they are, or just what they're dealing with in life. In terms of the AV critic, I don't know. They have a track record now, and I kind of expect that sort of review from them. I guess when you're so entrenched dogmatically in what you believe and you've picked your side, you really can't be open to it. It's kind of, I guess, what our film talks about to a certain degree. But when you're so entrenched in this stuff that you can't even rise above it to kind of see what's going on or hear other points of view, it's a bad spot to be in. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people in our society are like that. They have their team. Everybody on the other side is evil, no matter what. And there really isn't any, space for nuance or, gray areas or areas that maybe we can find common ground. And so, in the case of the AV Club, obviously when Dennis Prager is the star of the movie, I don't know if, he could, the reviewer could bring themselves to admit that there was anything worthwhile in our movie, even if there was.
Yeah, they actually were. They were gunning for your movie before it came out. I've read interviews when when they first announced the AV Club's take was immediately negative. I know the movie's out, it's in the can, as they say, and it's been that way for a while. You have to wrap up a film, but I almost feel like this is the kind of movie where you could continually update it, which is maybe not a good thing because there's so many different things happening in the culture. Do you, as a storyteller, want to continue this in some way, either online, a YouTube series, or an extension, maybe Blu-ray extras when it comes out in a few months? I was kind of curious. Just it feels like it's almost incomplete by nature, and it's not the film's fault; it's just the culture's fault.
Right. One of the members of our team, John Sullivan, who helped us a lot with this story, and of course he's directed other films in the past. He did the first two Dinesh D'Souza movies. he had an interesting thing to say about making a film like this, a documentary, is you never actually finish it. You just abandon it. And that's sort of the case here. I mean, there's so many things that you could focus on, and the story goes on, obviously, with what's going on today, nowadays, with comedians and cancel culture. This could be a mini series if we really wanted it to be. Ultimately, we wanted to get this thing out there and let culture kind of do its thing. I will say, though, it's a nice segue that you've kind of offered me here, but we do have a lot of extra material. When we filmed this movie, we did several live events. We did a comedy roundtable that featured Tim Allen and Adam Carolla and a number of other great comedians. These conversations are, they take place and, they're over an hour long, most of them. And so we have some really interesting stuff that didn't make the final cut because you can only put so much in a 90-minute film. And so we're looking forward to releasing these longer form conversations. We had Adam Carolla talking to Jordan Peterson in a great interview, Dave Rubin and Dennis Prager, and several live events with Adam Carolla and Dennis Prager that we want to get out there for people to see. And it's just, there's just more to the story. And I think these other pieces of content that we'll probably have available on iTunes or somewhere else that people can watch them, can get a little bit more, just got to dig a little deeper, I guess.
Yeah. The movie is hitting theaters at a really interesting time in the culture. Bill Burr has a special on Netflix which talks about these issues. Dave Chappelle is nonstop talking about First Amendment, free speech, free expression, the chill he feels, and he's essentially the best of the best right now. Is there sort of a zeitgeist happening here, or do you think that it'll take much more than your film and these other comedians to kind of help kind of turn the culture around?
Well, I certainly hope that our film makes a difference. And I will say that I think comedians tend to be the ones that always lead the way when there needs to be a radical shift. Comedians are the fearless ones. They're the ones that go out and say it when no one else will say it. And guys like Dave Chappelle and Bill Burr and even Adam Carolla, thankful he's in our film, but I don't know if you saw his roast of Alec Baldwin. Same thing. He just eviscerated this whole idea of cancel culture and safe spaces, and it is the comedians that usually lead the way, and we're seeing that happening. So it's very good timing, I guess, for our film. But this is happening in front of our faces, and I mean, I agree. I just think Chappelle is just an American treasure, and what he has to say right now is so important. And for all the people that really don't realize how bad things are, it takes a guy like that to really wake people up and tell them what's going on. So thank goodness for guys like Dave Chappelle, Bill Burr, comedians, because they tend to they're the first ones to speak truth when we really need it.
Yeah, actually, I recently rewatched Lenny, the 1970s movie with Dustin Hoffman, and seeing police officers in the back of the room waiting to arrest him for saying the wrong word. I'm thinking, well, now it's the people in the crowd who are looking to whip out their cell phone and get you in trouble anyway. It's sort of the times have changed, but they haven't. One last question for you, Justin. Yeah. What's next for you? I know you're kind of knee-deep in this project, you're promoting it, getting the word out, but do you have other directorial efforts lined up, other similar ventures on the horizon?
I have some ideas. I'm mostly focused on getting No Safe Spaces out there and making it successful. So spending a lot of time doing that right now. But I love narrative storytelling. I love films like where you have a script and actors and you tell a story. I didn't really necessarily think of myself as a documentary filmmaker, but I try to approach making this particular film as a narrative filmmaker, and that's why we have a lot of the reenactments and other things in there. So I'll probably be looking for another project that involves a little bit more narrative storytelling. Mm-hmm. So we'll see how that goes, but I'm very excited about this and mostly focused on trying to get just as many people as possible to see No Safe Spaces.
Yeah, well, I've been waving the flag and raising my arms and ringing the bell for this movie, and I'll continue to do so because it's that good, it's that important. Justin, thank you for joining the HitCast. The new movie, of course, is No Safe Spaces, playing in select theaters right now, going wide November 15th. But if you want to find out if it's playing in a theater near you, go to nosafespaces.com for all the theater details. You've got Denver, you've got San Diego. It's coming soon. It's coming near you. Please check it out. And also, tell a friend, spread the word, go on social media. If you enjoy it, that's the way it works. That word of mouth is essential when you don't have a massive studio and a marketing machine behind you. That intimate word of mouth power is everything. So check it out. It's important. It's a good movie, and wish you all the best. Congratulations on it, and we'll talk to you again for other projects.
Thank you, Christian. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out HollywoodandToto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter at HollywoodandToto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.